Hey there, Gabfest listeners. Before we start the show, I want to let you know about a story coming up a little later. It's from one of our partners, SAP. AI comes at you fast, and if you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Whether you're looking to automate tasks or embed AI in your business processes, SAP can help. To learn more, head to sap.com/AI and stick around for expert advice on how to embrace AI with confidence. Hello and welcome to the Slate Political Gabfest. August 8th, 2024, the These Walls Could Talk edition. I'm David Plotz of CityCast. John Dickerson's on vacation. No worries. Emily Bazelon of the New York Times Magazine and Yale University Law School is, of course, here. Hello, Emily.
Hello.
From New Haven, I assume. And replacing John, we got an actual Harvard professor. Not replacing in perpetuity, sort of like while John is on his brief vacation sabbatical, which is something that Juliette understands because she is a real, genuine Harvard professor. From the Harvard Kennedy School, Atlantic and CNN contributor, Juliette Kayyem, much beloved Gabfest regular guest host. Hello, Juliette.
Hello, good morning.
This week on the Gabfest, Tim, these guys are weird. Walz is Kamala Harris's running mate. What does the Minnesota governor bring to the ticket besides dad jokes and an extreme normal guy energy? Then Google is a monopoly, says a federal judge. What is going to happen to the internet's most important company now that that ruling has gone against them? Then Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin canceled plea agreements with 3 9/11 plotters who were tortured and have been held at Guantanamo for 20 years. Why did he send their cases back for trial? Plus, of course, we'll have cocktail chatter. This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by SAP. First, the bad news. SAP Business AI won't help you generate cubist versions of your family's holiday photos, but it will help you understand which supplier is best to help you roll out your plant-based packaging in Southeast Asia and identify the training your junior project manager needs to rise up the ranks and automate repetitive tasks while you focus on big innovations so you can be ready for the next opportunity. Revolutionary technology, real-world results. That's SAP Business AI. I feel that Tim Walz, who has been delightful so far, is going to find himself in 20 years, like at fan conventions, saying these guys are weird all the time. There's going to be like Gen X fans who have lined up to get their "these guys are weird" boxer shorts signed, and their "these guys are weird" candles. Catchphrases are a curse. Tim Walz is already beginning to regret that he came up with one, but it did seem to get him on the ticket. So, Emily, Walz's resume is pretty tasty if you're a Democrat. 24-year Army veteran, teacher of the year, state championship winning Coach Taylor, high school football coach, bluish House member in a pink district, and then a hugely successful and pretty popular governor, liberal governor in Minnesota. It is a great biography. There's great vibes. What do you make of him so far? I hadn't heard of him 3 weeks ago. I bet you hadn't either. What do you feel about him so far? Juliette's like, I heard of him. Juliette's sitting there saying, you'd heard of him. No. Had you actually heard of him, Juliette?
Yeah, but only because maybe I had like 1 week on you, just because I looked him up because I was doing a lot of stuff on open carry and campaigning after the assassination attempt against Trump and the challenges for securing these candidates. So I was a geek and looked up, who's in charge of which state and what their open carry laws were like. That's the loser that I am. But I did not know his politics or his history.
Well, what has impressed you, Emily, so far? And not impressed you?
Well, I am interested in the contrast in how the Walz pick is playing versus Trump's pick of J.D. Vance. So if you're thinking about the policy stances of these two vice presidential candidates, they both double down on the presidential candidate's views, right? So Walz is a progressive. He has this record from being governor of passing a whole raft of legislation that Democrats and liberals are excited about. Vance, similarly, doubles down on Trump's views. And yet Walz's pick is playing differently because his biography, his resume, his identity is such a contrast with Kamala Harris. Whereas Vance's biography, though, if you went back to like his upbringing and his West Virginia roots and the themes of hillbilly elegy, then he's a contrast with Trump. But his current identity is so marinated in right-wing internet. And of course, he has his Yale Law School, Silicon Valley, young adulthood, or like 20s and 30s. And so they seem to be just totally a contrast in terms of media coverage. I guess one way to think of this is like the policy preferences and the signaling that does versus the identity and the vibes that you were just talking about. I mean, on vibes, Walz is playing kind of perfectly for Harris right now. I do wonder, though, going forward, if the clear signaling of progressive values and policies that he represents means that the Walz-Harris campaign is going to need to do more to show that it's, pivoting to the center in the usual phrase of general elections.
All right, Juliette, what is your early impression of Walz?
I mean, I think it's such an interesting choice. I was a Mark Kelly fan because I love astronauts. That's how deep it got. And was thinking that would be the strategy, just because you would do the normal electoral strategy. I personally thought going into it, Shapiro had negatives unrelated to his stance on Israel and the protest in Pennsylvania, including, I think, just his ambition. I mean, I think that is relevant to a president, especially a president or potential president like Harris, who, is not going to want to be wondering what is happening, behind her. And so I never thought it would be Shapiro. I call the Walz pick I hope this isn't too gendered, but, she picked the guy who feels like he is marrying up. And, and I like that attitude. I mean, I like that sort of aura that he's like this sort of, gosh, oh my gosh, the happy companion. He's a little Doug, her husband-ish in that sense. And I like the vibe. But now let's just talk about the policy and what he delivers, because she has to win. I'll be looking at the extent to which the loss of not choosing Pennsylvania and its governor can be compensated for, just by Shapiro's enthusiasm. Shapiro has a long future in the Democratic Party, and he's going to play it right. You're going to also have Arizona, which interestingly enough is having a backlash by its Republican Party, a backlash against Trump. And then you're just looking at the blue wall, in the Midwest and whether it could be moved. And I am intrigued to see if he can do it. It's a much more appealing ticket. What Emily was saying in terms of the doubling down on Trump with Vance made sense 3 weeks ago when you thought it was Biden and you knew Biden was going to struggle with the base. So you just get your base, which could be bigger, as Trump and Vance were trying to do. And we'll see how this plays. But I'm, the idea is you hear some people say, well, that was stupid. She should have picked Pennsylvania. It was not at all clear that was the right strategy to pick Shapiro. And I do think this one is one that's going to be appealing to people who will be galvanized by the ticket.
I find Walz very reminiscent of Tim Kaine. When Tim Kaine was put on the Clinton ticket, there was this sense that, he's this, I think similarly, I like your phrase, marrying up, that he was marrying up to Clinton. But he ended up doing nothing for that ticket. And do you worry that if you're a Democrat, that could be the same, that he has a really nice vibe, he has a really nice energy, but that ultimately it's going to be kind of irrelevant?
I mean, isn't that always true of the vice presidential pick? Like, they're never going to do the whole thing. They can't really. But in this moment before the convention, I mean, the Harris-Walz ticket is getting great media coverage. Democrats are energized. That will help with momentum going into the convention. And then I think, in the sort of sprint to the election, the real question becomes, what issues do they highlight? And also, what does Trump do? I mean, Trump is his own worst enemy right now. He's not sticking to the obvious, message, which is these people are super liberal and they're out of touch with America. And I think Walz makes it a little harder to make that argument, given that he's this, rural Minnesota football coach.
Yeah. I think the vibe is different. Everyone's going to talk about vibe. I think the vibe is different, though, than it was with Clinton Kaine. I mean, in some ways, Trump was the Harris. Like, I don't mean it that way, not for me, but it was exciting. It was different. It was sort of outside the norm. Clinton was boring. I'm just caricaturing, but Hillary Clinton was like boring and old school. And, in the mantra of the time, we're not going back applied to her. Right. I mean, she was the old school. And I just think that vibe is different now. I mean, for one, the metrics, do show, I mean, if the polling is going to be all over the place, but, it is hard for Trump to raise his floor. It is very hard. And doubling down on J.D. Vance is making it even harder. If this becomes a campaign about, reproductive freedoms and niceness, the Democrats win, right? And you're sort of exhausted. Look, Trump has no campaigning to speak of. So there's going to be a question about his mental and physical health, which I think is fair. I thought it was fair for Biden. I think it's fair for Trump. So there's a lot of issues where, now Harris sort of represents the new in a way that Hillary couldn't. And therefore Walz is sort of that sort of balancing with that. I do want to say something about Trump's campaign, because it's worth saying that this excitement that Emily is talking about has to be compared to the man is showing up nowhere. I mean, he's in Montana in this critical week, one swing state. The media follows around Vance as if he's the nominee. Vance can't deliver. He's got 20 people at these conferences. He's so bad at this. I think that's going to be interesting too. Is the floor falling? Or can Trump regain his momentum? And that may have to do with his physical and mental ability at this stage. I have no qualms saying that clearly. I think there is an issue now there's a Biden issue for Trump.
Do you think the Democrats can use the Biden issue on Trump? Can they use the age against him? Or because they had Biden, they just have to leave it alone?
Well, Biden's going to show up on Monday of the Democratic Convention. That's going to be a hard day. I was neither a proponent or opponent of this switch. I think I was very, very torn about the Biden factor. Now that my eyes are open, I see that this was the right strategy. So they're going to have Biden on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in 2 weeks when the convention is going to be all looking forward. And I think the we're not going back will, in a weird way, also apply to Biden in terms of age, that this is a demographic and age shift. And I think it will be very much a part of their strategy. We're not going back also has to do with age. It's not just policy. You're starting to see it. But I think the conventional media will get more comfortable talking directly about Trump's mental and physical abilities. And the Democrats, if they're smart, will say, okay, Vance is likely, if he wins, Vance will be president. And that guy, my God, I've never seen anything like this in terms of inability to rise to the moment or, to do what you are intended to do, which is do no harm.
Just to back up your point, Juliette, I was interested that the medical news site Stat News did a piece this week about Trump's mental capacity, like having, experts come in and analyze his speech patterns and talk about how they've changed. And that's the kind of turn I think you're talking about.
Yeah. I think it was fair for Biden. I think it's fair for Trump. If only it points to, we better pay more attention to Vance. And he's just easily caricatured.
Emily, they often say the best day for a vice presidential nominee is the day you're nominated. And it's clear that Walz is having a lot of fun now. And it also seems like he's got this great sunny temperament that's going to carry him forward in a good way. But for the Democrats, how do they maintain this sense of fun and joy, which I think is just utterly essential to winning if they're going to win?
I mean, this to me is the most surprising part of the shift from Biden to Harris. It's like the sun came out and everyone's dancing around in a field of flowers. I think partly for the Democrats, it's a sense of relief of this burden lifting, and partly this kind of unexpected way that the, Kamala dancing, Kamala laughing memes are playing out. Young people seem excited. Women seem excited. I still just want to remind everyone, this is like a razor thin margin race. I mean, it is not clear that this vibe is translating into enough votes of moderates and centrists and, the non-excited yet. And so, again, I think the question is going to be, how do you keep the sense of joy going? But also, how do you persuade people who are not necessarily, part of Democrat world that these people are for you too, that they, are really focused on making sure that all Americans can have a middle-class life, right? I mean, that's the central promise that Walz talks about, I think, when you boil it all down. But there are a lot of ways that progressives can get distracted or can make people feel alienated by emphasizing issues that can seem kind of tangential to that essential goal. And so I think Walz and Harris still have a challenge in front of them. And I don't see them yet picking an issue or two that distinguishes them from the kind of, liberal progressive menu. And it's not that those are my policy preferences, but I feel like there's some signaling that they could do to try to broaden their appeal. I still wonder about people feeling boxed out who are not already part of their Democratic field of flowers.
So a couple things. There's going to be, I agree with Emily. There's been an interesting twist on immigration and how the Democrats are discussing immigration. The numbers were horrible in Trump. This isn't like liberal Juliette talking. This is, I follow border patterns, and the border is in better shape than it was under Trump. And the same is true with crime. So they're in a weird, they're going very aggressive on the caricature. I want to say two things that sort of part of this, like what's ahead. The first is the IVF issue, which I think is really interesting, and how Walz is addressing it. Many people know he and his wife had to utilize IVF. They have a daughter who they named Hope because it took them so long to have her. The IVF issue is very consistent with his sort of Midwestern, just leave us the hell alone. You may not want to do what your neighbor does, but you don't have to be swarmy and weird about what your neighbor is deciding to do. And I thought it was interesting that in his vice presidential bio, that's the last sentence. I think that it may not be about abortion, but it may be about, married couples trying to figure out, how to have babies as sort of a counter to JD Vance. I want to just alert people. It's Thursday, August 8th. He's clearly being swift boated. If you follow along, people who don't remember, that was the attacks on John Kerry's military service in the Vietnam War. It ended up being successful because I think the Democrats thought there's no way this is going to work. This is John Kerry. Everyone knows that he's a war hero. JD Vance is hinting at it. There are some people in the National Guard who have put a Facebook post up suggesting that Walz left the National Guard when they had to be deployed. The calendar does not prove that. I'm just going by what I've seen. But the Democrats better get out in front with this. In fact, shame JD Vance for doing it. JD Vance is, and I didn't do any military service, so I'm not going to play this game. But JD Vance was a sort of military reporter, and he was not a combat soldier. The calendar shows that Walz had a several decade commitment to the military. He left, he then joined, and then he left to run for Congress. His National Guard troop unit then got deployed several months later. But the Democrats should get ahead of this because this stuff works.
Can I ask one final trivial question to end this, which is Walz and Kamala Harris are the same age and he looks like 17 years older. What is up with that?
Why? Let's see. Well, I mean, one reason is that it matters a lot less when men age. They can age in public life with a lot less cost. And, maybe this just isn't a priority for him. And it has been for Harris. She's also from a fancier part of the country where upkeep is more of a priority, especially for women. I mean, I don't want to go on a rant, but I feel like the cost of upkeep in terms of time as well as actual money is high for women in a way that it's just not for men. And that's particularly true in cities like San Francisco, and DC, which is where Harris is from and lives.
Yeah. No comment, but true. Every year I say, okay, I'm stopping. I'm going to let gravity take over. And then a few minutes later, it's like, I can't do it.
No, but you can't stop because you're how I get my makeup advice.
I know, it's true.
Please,
Emily's most famous line, as I was telling her what her makeup kit should entail, she goes, I don't see the purpose of blush. I was like, okay.
It's so true. I got it, though. You told me to get it, and I sometimes use it, but I still don't understand it.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by Public.com. If you're looking for a simple yet sophisticated investing experience, check out Public.com. From stocks to options, bonds to crypto, it's all there. You can even earn an industry-leading 5.1% APY on your cash. Public is trusted by millions of investors, and NerdWallet just gave Public 4.6 stars and called it an impressive experience. Sign up in 2 minutes at Public.com. All your investing in one place. This is a paid advertisement for Public investing, 5.1% APY as of June 17th, 2024, and is subject to change. NerdWallet overall rating 4.6 out of 5 as of May 2024. Full disclosures in the podcast description.
This podcast is brought to you by Slate Studios and SAP. AI is moving so fast. If you don't get reliable and relevant advice, your business might miss out. Welcome to Dear Artie, an advice column from SAP, where we tackle the tricky questions at the intersection of AI and business. Here's our expert, the technology futurist, Ian Kahn.
Hi, I'm excited to dive into today's question.
Dear Artie, as our company expands, so do our hiring efforts. How can AI help us attract top talent? Signed, Searching for Higher Power.
So, searching for higher power, one of the most daunting undertakings of an HR leader today is building a new team and finding and vetting new talent. This is a very time-consuming process and can take precious organizational resources. As a companion to the HR team, AI technology can be used to create job descriptions, analyze candidate resumes, and filter candidates into various pools based on experience, skills, or any other parameter. You can also use AI to match internal talent with positions available. Parameters for this can be set, rules can be set, that can all be done through the algorithm. There are so many things that we as humans could be not looking at that AI can do in a matter of seconds.
Embrace AI with confidence. Head to sap.com/AI to learn more.
Judge Amit Mehta of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia on Monday found that Google had violated antitrust laws. Its exclusive deals with phone companies to be their default browser effectively gave them a monopoly over internet search and contributed to another monopoly over text ads. This is the biggest antitrust ruling since Microsoft lost an antitrust suit in 1999, a loss that was sort of overturned, but did ultimately hobble Microsoft and open the door for other companies such as Google to thrive. So what did Google do, according to Meta, and why is that illegal, Emily?
What Google did was make these deals with Apple and other companies to make it so that when you buy the Apple phone, the default browser is Chrome, and you're just like in that world and you don't think about it again. And that gives them a huge advantage in terms of user adoption. I mean, I think 90% of searches are on Google. We use it as a verb. I know that Google is disputing those numbers, but like, come on, everyone. We know that this is total market dominance over search. And it makes it really hard for competitors to enter because of the network effects, right? Google is also improving its search along the way by vacuuming up all the data that we give them by doing this search. And that's just a kind of classic problem of a monopoly. Over time, you expect the service to worsen and to get more expensive, even if that's in an indirect way for consumers. Personally, I feel like the worsening is happening in real time in front of me. I feel like Google results are just like getting crappy in this way that's kind of driving me crazy just in the last few months. I think it has to do with how they're trying to incorporate AI, but for the life of me, I feel like it's worse. And, you know, the broader principle at stake in this case that I'm watching with great interest is how to adapt the Sherman Act for modern times, especially in the world of tech, right? So since the 1980s, the courts have stuck to this pretty narrow view that in order to win a lawsuit, an antitrust lawsuit against a alleged monopolist, you have to show a direct extra cost to consumers. That's the only kind of effective monopoly that gets you damages. And that's a really narrow understanding of the Sherman Act, which is about anti-competitive practices more broadly. It's not in the text of the statute to say that it has to be, directly passing along a cost to consumers. This case is a really good example of how I think you can show that consumers are suffering in some way, but that also the cost to competitors entering the market is an important factor. And so I think it's important that Judge Mehta is taking that into account. And I think this case, it gives the government's other cases against Google. They have another separate suit against Apple, against Meta. It gives those suits legs as well. These are really complicated, long cases, but just the fact that there's this one initial judicial finding is going to, I think, start to change the behavior of the tech companies. And over time, what you want is more entrants into the search market.
What are the possible consequences for Google and solutions? Could they be broken up? Could they be forced to give access to other worse search engines? Could Apple be forced to carry worse search engines?
Yeah, I mean, the range of remedies are going to be addressed on September 6th. In fact, the opinion is about 277 pages long. And at the end, the court says, I'm not going to come up with potential remedies. You now understand, Google, what the harm is, what is the pool of potential remedies. And in the Microsoft case, the remedy side was actually invalidated on appeal, even though the holding still held. So there's going to be a variety of options that Google might consider. So it's still going to be forced to come up with the solutions, even though it's going to appeal. So we'll see what they come up with. I thought the interesting, and here's one area to think about, is what the court found was it is completely inconsistent for Google to argue as their parting shot in their conclusion after this long trial was, we're dominant because we're the best, right? So the court says, well, if that's true, why the heck are you spending $1 gazillion paying companies to have you as their internet default search engine? And the court, we think this is about law and antitrust and Standard Oil and all the old rules. The court actually took psychological and psychologist testimony about this thing known as the power of defaults, which all of us recognize. And Emily was just suggesting it. Like, she's so used to Google, it's not performing. She could switch to another search engine. She's not, because the power of defaults is our habits and characteristics are formed by Google's investment in making sure that we use them as a default. And so that's going to be where I think that there's a little bit of wiggle room in terms of a remedy, but there'll be an appeal here. It's a remarkable opinion, as Emily was saying, in terms of how are we going to regulate the internet, not in terms of content, but in terms of competition. And this is a historic ruling in that sense.
So one of the things that I'm curious about is search engines to me are sort of basically a public utility now. And when things are a public utility, you get into trouble when they're owned by private companies. Is there a way legally, Emily, that the solution for this is that Google just remains the default search engine and it is the search engine, but it's essentially made open. It's open to the public so that everyone gets to use it, and Google doesn't get to control it in the way that it controls it. But we still Google everything, but it's somehow less of a monopoly.
That's really interesting. I can't think of how that would possibly happen. There isn't, when we have public utilities, it's because there's no other way to do it, really. And that's just not true about search. You could have competition for search. We just are out of the habit. I sort of wonder if what is going to happen is one of two things. Google will come to some kind of agreement where they will agree to let other search engines use enough of their platform that those search engines really will be able to meaningfully compete, right? You could have a more tailored search, like a search that is for kids, for example, that doesn't show like X-rated results. And that some of those search engines could actually work better than the alternatives we currently have because they're piggybacking off of all of the data that Google has. Another possibility is whether ChatGPT and Claude and the other artificial intelligence services are going to kind of take over. I mean, I watch young people who are into those alternatives, and they're doing a lot of their search via those alternatives. And I wonder if that's going to be how Google loses its market share, that the AI gets better and more current. And that allows people to have an alternative that actually functions as well or better than what Google is doing now. I mean, then there's also Google's own AI development, obviously, to think about, but maybe it will be one of several options as opposed to the verb that we now know, and in my case, at least, have increasing frustration with.
Yeah, I agree that I do think the AI is going to moot this in the same way that Microsoft really, the effect of the Microsoft antitrust case wasn't really to destroy the Windows operating system. It just slowed Microsoft down, distracted them, and made them unable to capitalize on the internet in quite the same way. And I feel like probably the effect of this suit will be something similar to Google, which is that they will not be able to dominate the AI universe. And the way AI becomes supplements or supplants search. Yeah, I think that's right, Emily.
This couldn't have come at a worse time for Google in the sense that it both is now, it's in trouble with its legacy commodity or public utility or whatever you want to call it, in the sense that it's going to have to come up with some solution to satisfy the court if it's not overturned on appeal. And it is a little bit behind on the AI. So its new market dominance is not at all clear. So if you're Google, Google was probably already assessing the number of people, as Emily's describing, like our kids who are not doing the Google searches, but are doing the ChatGPT searches. And realizing it was losing market dominance. Now it's being told by the court, you can't maintain that market dominance. And who knows what's the battle for AI, who's going to win that. But it's not at all clear it would be Google.
This episode of the Gabfest is sponsored by SimpliSafe. If you're constantly thinking about the safety of the people and things you value most, secure your home with the best. Trust SimpliSafe to protect your home and provide security and customer care. You will sleep better every night knowing that SimpliSafe's 24/7 monitoring agents are standing by to protect you. If someone tries to break in, they'll send emergency help when you need it most. And right now, SimpliSafe is offering Gabfest listeners 20% off a system. Just visit simplysafe.com/Gabfest. You'll find that SimpliSafe just keeps getting better. With exclusive live guard protection, SimpliSafe agents can act within 5 seconds of receiving your alarm and can even see and speak to intruders inside your home, warning them the police are on their way. So protect your home this summer with 20% off any new SimpliSafe system when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring. Just visit simplysafe.com/Gabfest. That's simplysafe.com/Gabfest. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. This episode is brought to you by GiveWell. Maybe you're someone who likes to optimize things. You choose the perfect credit card to maximize your travel points. You find the fastest route when you drive. Shouldn't you handle your charitable giving the same way? GiveWell spends 50,000 hours every year doing deep dives into different charitable programs to help you do the most good for your dollar. GiveWell has now spent over 17 years researching charitable organizations and only directs funding to a few of the highest impact opportunities they found. Over 100,000 donors, including me, have used GiveWell to donate more than $2 billion. Rigorous evidence suggests that these donations will save over 200,000 lives and improve the lives of millions more. GiveWell wants as many donors as possible to make informed decisions about high-impact giving. So all of their research and recommendations are available on their site for free. You can make tax-deductible donations to their recommended funds or charities, and GiveWell does not take a cut. So go to givewell.org to find out more or make a donation. Select podcast and enter Political Gabfest at checkout to make sure they know you heard about them from us. Again, that's givewell.org to donate or find out more. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin suddenly voided 3 plea agreements reached after years of negotiations between military prosecutors and 9/11 defendants. notably with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and then two other defendants who were less involved in the 9/11 attacks than KSM was. Under the plea agreements, the three would have pled guilty to the murder of nearly 3,000 people on 9/11 and faced life imprisonment, and the government would forego the possibility of seeking the death penalty against them. Austin, seemingly surprised by the agreement, or perhaps under huge political pressure, or both, revoked most of the authority of the military judge who approved the pleas, canceled the pleas, and says he will now oversee these cases and seek the death penalty in a trial against them. So, Juliette, these cases, to use a technical military term, are a rat fuck. Why are they a rat fuck?
Oh, God. I mean, so I have a little history in this that is part of this story. So in the early administration of Obama, remember, Obama has this promise he's going to close Gitmo in a year. I'm going to tell this story only because it's actually going to be relevant to what was decided this weekend. One of the options to close Gitmo was, of course, to bring Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and others to New York City or some other place, have them go through a trial, because already then in 2009, the failures of the military commissions were known, and try them there. There was then only because I was a Homeland person and dealt with the Homeland, there was then a pushback that somehow, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or these other guys, if they made their way in shackles to New York City, everything would blow up, right? I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing, but there was no ability to move the limited number of detainees anywhere. So what, over the last however many years, we've been just trying to disperse them throughout the country. That 2009-2010 drama, where it was clear you could not bring them here, is why I believe, rightfully, the military court decided to take the plea agreement, because there was no other option at this stage. You can't move them. The military trials are not going well. We haven't, it's just ridiculous that they're still there. You get the plea, he's going to die, relatively soon. You get closure for the families. Austin, I don't get this decision except for politics. This judge was appointed for this reason, to come up with a solution. She's now thrown under the bus. What do you think the solution's going to be? We don't know how Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was detained. We don't know if there was aggressive interrogation. We don't know. I don't want to, I'm just throwing it out there. We know that his defense attorneys would allege that there was torture and other abusive behaviors. You don't want that in court. You don't want the conditions of what's going on in Gitmo in court. Take the agreement. Everyone is going to die relatively soon. And I was really surprised about this. And I didn't think, I'm sorry to go on my rant, but I didn't think that the pressure was that great. We got a little alert that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed pled guilty. He's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. I didn't feel like there was a whole bunch of outrage. Maybe some of the families didn't like it, but some of the families did like it. They wanted closure. So that's my 20-year rant, that we had closure that was promised in 2009 when Obama said he would close Gitmo in a year. We had closure at hand, and Austin blinked. Sorry, that's my rant.
I mean, right. Another thing that's inexplicable about this is that there's just no way that Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or these other people are going to actually be executed under the death penalty, given the probable, and I think it is probable, taint of torture on these cases and the way in which that is likely to play out in court. And also just given the incredible snail's pace that all of these proceedings moved at, because every single aspect of them has to be litigated seemingly over and over again. I mean, it really is a kind of Kafkaesque set of proceedings for these military tribunals. And I guess the other thing I find hard to understand about this is isn't this a potential benefit of Biden being a lame duck president, that you take I agree with you, Juliette, not huge seeming political hit over this, and you just get it done. And that allows these three cases to be resolved, but also potentially other deals to get struck that then allows Guantanamo to be closed. And, Guantanamo just remains this enormous stain, I think, on the United States, this huge albatross that we created in a kind of moment of panic and have never figured out how to wind down. Here was like the beginning of the winding down, and now it's canceled, and I don't understand it.
Is it possible, Emily, that they're just booting this till after the election? That basically they're going to do this, but wait till it's November 7th and then do it?
I mean, it's hard to imagine that because Austin would then have to personally take responsibility for doing it himself, because what he did was essentially like kneecap the judge he had appointed, just as Juliette said. And there's a critique, too, that he didn't really have the authority to do that in a kind of partial way. And so he really is going to own whatever happens next. And it's a little hard to imagine him having this sudden revelation after the election, like, oh, I want to personally accept these plea deals now. I guess it could happen, but
no, I can't imagine. I mean, as Emily said, the clock was in the Democrats' favor for this. You take whatever Fox News hits you have. They were not big. I mean, most lawyers had come to the conclusion that this was an experiment that was done, that whatever we thought Guantanamo might be 20 years later, it's not. You had a quiet exit for horrible, horrible people who are not going to see the light of day any day. You had a closure of a military commission process that has been a joke. And as Emily said, every piece of it is litigated so that you get no traction. And you have a president who can say, I finally closed Guantanamo in the way it needed to be closed without any political hit. I just did not get it unless, I mean, the only feeling in this bad one is like, unless Austin is sort of personally committed to keeping this process going because he feels like, we have to show that military commissions can work. But this judge was put in place to find a solution. And for that brief moment, I'm going to say it sounded like a really good one. No one was clamoring for his head anymore. It's been decades. Guantanamo is more about us than about the terrorists now. Let's close this. And we had it. And I don't get it. I literally have not heard a single thing that explains this.
Can I just add one point that I think gets at the futility of this system that the United States has designed? So, the whole idea of the military commissions were to try these terror suspects. To date, they have convicted 8 people out of the more than 780 prisoners who've been held at Guantanamo. 8. And cost billions of dollars.
Billions. Yeah. These were the conversations we were having in the first days of the Obama administration. There's been nothing.
Yeah, when Attorney General Eric Holder wanted to move the cases to New York, to federal district court, which was treated as this yes. And that was treated as this crazy, terrible idea to give American justice to these people. But, lo, these many years later, this has just
crazy.
Been, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and also, if you think about this as, is KSM and trying to embarrass America in the world, there's no greater way to embarrass America in the world than to have this linger and linger and linger. Whereas if he'd just been convicted in some trial and was serving a life sentence in the Supermax in Florence, Colorado, it's over. No one would think about him. I saw that one of the Tsarnaev brothers is still alive and living in that Supermax. Have you thought about a Tsarnaev brother in a decade?
Or Saran, every once in a while, these assassins, they come up for parole, and you're like, oh God, he's still alive. It's just, in some ways, honestly, in the narrative of terrorism, to treat them as mere criminals. We don't give a shit about that. Sorry for the French. We don't give a damn about them. We don't care. They're going to go off to is actually a very strong counterterrorism policy. In other words, you're not special. And Khalid Sheikh Mohammed pled to the most egregious crime and terrorist attack against American citizens. He pled guilty. He admitted it. Now we're going to go through this freaking process again. It is madness. And I was not feeling the same reaction that we got in the Obama administration to the idea of bringing them back into U.S. soil. I was not for a trial.
Just in closing, did you two get a chance to see that one photo that The Guardian got hold of one of the defendants who actually pled, Ammar al-Baluchi? So The Guardian got hold of one photo from him at a black site and when he had been tortured. And it is the most unsettling, disturbing, demoralizing photo you'll ever see. He's basically naked, and he's a gaunt, starved person who looks haunted, who looks like he's been tortured, as he probably had been. And there are thousands of these photos that exist. Now, who's to say they would necessarily get out if there were these trials? But like, look, this is a grotesque national crime that we committed against these villains. They are villains, but we also committed a moral crime against them. And if we face a future where photos like that are going to be more likely to appear and be so embarrassing and disgraceful, I don't think that's a particularly positive thing either. Now let's go to cocktail chatter. I'm guessing, based on all of our proclivities and athleticism and obsession with fitness and activity, that all of us are going to chatter about the Olympics. Juliette, Kayyem, what is your chatter?
So I'm thinking about, I have a lot of history with Olympics. I have been to, this is my fifth. I was in Paris early on because I'm a security and safety planner. I get hired by people to make sure everything was okay. But honestly, this is on the fun side. There's a lot of issues with Olympics in terms of the stress they put on cities, the competition, all the craziness that goes on. But when the closing ceremonies happen this weekend, and I'm, watching, because I've been watching every night. I'm shocked at myself, how much I watch. I have it on in the background when I'm working. I have Peacock streaming. I can't get enough of badminton. Like, it's crazy. These sports, like skateboarding. Something about this Olympics has moved us. It might be Paris, and they've done a great job. I also think, in a weird way, and even though COVID is percolating up in the background of this summer, this is the first real post-COVID Olympics, and it's just a blast. And so I want to raise a glass to Paris, to this Olympics. I felt really good about lots of things because of the Olympics, about youth and athletics and competition. And I know in the background there's corruption and bad stuff and whatever. For 2 weeks, I haven't cared.
Emily, what's your chatter?
3 things about the Olympics have struck me. I've also been watching, I think, more than I have maybe ever. So one is the serve in table tennis. You're supposed to throw it up 6 inches in the air. They do this whole weird thing before they have to show the ball to the opponent in their hand before they throw it. And then they do this motion with their head and their shoulders and neck. I swear it looks like they are about to hit the ball with their nose. I know that they're not doing that, but that's really what it looks like. And it's all about the spin on the serve and disguising it. And it is a motion that is so different from how, normal people play table tennis. I'm trying to think of another sport where you just have to do this completely different thing as a professional than, the rules are different than when you're just playing for fun. That's my first observation. My second one is, and this is cranky, why is it that the runners have to wear, paper tags on their bodies that are safety pinned to them? That is so weird. That's how I do a road race once a year. I just feel like they could come up with some better technology than safety pins for this international competition where we all know who they are. They're wearing different colors. What is up with that? And my last Olympic thought actually comes from one of my kids. How great would it be if there was just a lottery where, as an Olympic athlete, you had to also compete in one randomly assigned sport that is not your sport? Okay, I don't mean that the sumo wrestlers, if there are such people, should get up on the balance beam and do something dangerous. But I would love to see what would happen if one of the skateboarders in their skateboarding costume had to run the 100-meter dash alongside the runners. It would just give a sense of the ordinary person, or at least the non-specialist athlete, and just the difference would be extremely amusing. I know it's not going to happen, but that's my personal wish for at least some of the events.
And my chatter is also Olympic based. So there's an amazing short film that's up on the New York Times called 10-Meter Tower. It actually is a film made back in 2017 by 2 Swedish filmmakers. And what they did is they paid 70 people about $30 to go up the 10-meter tower, the high dive, and stand over the pool where Olympians dive, and asked them to go up there and dive if they wanted to, or jump in if they wanted to, or not if they didn't. They just got paid to go up there in a bathing suit. And it's incredible watching people go up there and grapple with their fear and their anxiety and their desire to show off. And, some of them do it. Some of them don't do it. Some of them go up in pairs and have these conversations, these extremely anxious conversations with each other. Some of them go up alone and have conversations with themselves. It is fantastic. It's one of the few situations where you can genuinely see real people grappling with real fear and real anxiety. They're not acting. They're just standing at a place that would give me terror. And the lesson is, to me, the only person who handled it normally was a little girl who kind of looked at the edge, then immediately said, all right, if I'm going to do it, I'm just going to do it, and just jumped off. Like, she didn't stand. And the more people sit and think and talk about it, the more fretful and anxious and terrified they get. It's awesome. Listeners, you've got chatters. Please keep them coming to us by emailing them at gabfest@slate.com, something that you're chattering about. Maybe Olympic related, maybe not. And our listener chatter this week comes from Fraser Ronald in Canada.
Hi, Political Gabfest. Given the current friction in democracy, of which Canada is not immune, it's nice to see democracies that function as advertised. Right now, that seems to be only among cells, as outlined in Is Your Nervous System a Democracy or a Dictatorship? By Ari Berkowitz on the Scientific American website. It seems that while there are dictator neurons and oligarchies of neurons, there are also democracies of neurons, and they all work well. A monkey apparently couldn't reach out its arm if the majority in its parliament of neurons didn't vote for that. It's the kind of direct democracy I can get behind, because without it, I probably couldn't drink my coffee. Thanks so much for all the efforts you put into your show. It always goes to the front of my podcast queue. Take care.
That's all for our episode this week. But wait, there's more. If you liked us, you're going to love our bonus episode, which is also out now in your podcast feed. We're going to talk about RFK Jr. We're going to talk about him, and particularly about this weird story about the bear that he dumped in Central Park a decade ago, coming out of this interesting New Yorker profile of him. It's only available for Slate Plus subscribers. So Slate Plus subscribers, you have kept us in clover for so many years. We really appreciate you. You get so much for your subscription. You get discounts to live shows, these bonus episodes, no hitting the paywall on the Slate site. And if you're a member, thank you so much. If you're not a member, go to slate.com/Gabfest Plus and become a member today. Slate.com/Gabfest Plus. That's our show for today. The Gabfest is produced by Shana Roth, usually, but not today. Ethan Oberman sat in on a very difficult production, which I've caused all the problems. Ethan, thank you so much. Our researcher is Julie Hugan. Our music is by They Might Be Giants. Ben Richmond is Senior Director for Podcast Operations. Alicia Montgomery is the VP of Audio for Slate. For Emily Bazelon and the always game, always delightful Juliette Kayyem, I'm David Plotz. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week.